Great, well, thank you, everyone. I just want to say how important this foundation is going to be for the residents of Iowa. This is game changer for drug abatement across the state. So I'm just very excited to see how we move forward and getting these structures in place and having that investment from this group to really move the foundation to do great things. We have we have the opportunity right now to set this as the greatest foundation to do great work. And so I'm excited to have you all aboard, and I think working together and collaboratively, we'll be able to do great things. We have a lot of work to do. And so today, we are going to go through and really get that investment from you and work groups that need to be formed in order for this foundation to be able to be functioning and working correctly for the greater good of our residents. So with that, we're going to start moving through the agenda. So bear with us as this is truly a work in progress as the foundation is and getting everything together. Everyone should have received a board packet. So is there anyone that did not?
For the folks who are virtual, it was sent out last evening to your email address. We killed a lot of trees to have it in paper here.
I think the lady buried an extra set.
There-
Maybe we should grab it back. You did get the. Trying to get to a set. I'm kind of extras. So, thank you.
Okay. Well, the first thing we have is the minutes from the May 16th board meeting, but they are
There.
not there and not complete. So there is no action to take on that. Hopefully, we will have something at our next meeting to approve last month's meeting and this month's meeting minutes as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Marty and Holly for item 3.
Thanks, Catherine. On the agenda, it just talked about incorporator update, which I guess is me, because I incorporated the entity. So what you have here for the request from the last meeting, something that would identify the roster of people as being selected for this process. So the first 3 pages are simply a list of names by region of who's serving from those regions. We still have 3 regions that have not come through with appointments. So what, and the language is that I'm acknowledging that you've been selected by the regions to serve as a director of the foundation, because as you know, that's the MOU is that each region shall choose someone. So as the incorporator, I'm simply acknowledging those appointments, along with the legislative appointments and the statewide appointments in the last page. Fourth page has my signature. So you can keep that in terms of if you need something in the way of a credential. And then the next page is simply the start of the corporate, what will be the corporate records book, acknowledging the incorporation, indicating that at the last meeting, we had these 3 volunteers who agreed to be regional officers. And then all of this just is reflecting what happened at the last meeting.
This is like our new resolution.
Oh,
Your action to approve.
So on page 4, written action without a meeting, that's the resolve that the following persons are hereby selected as provisional officers. And there'll be an action this morning to affirm that. Um, So I think this just covers just all of the legal pieces we need to get the corporate record book in place and to get the corporation properly organized. And so
Good morning,
you'll
Holly.
see-
Sorry to interrupt. You copy?
Yeah. What do you need? Did you get your electronic copy?
Yes, this is John Tharp. Can you copy at my end?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry.
So if you look at page 5, there are a whole lot of resolutions on there. And we're going to actually talk about most of these issues as we go through the agenda. So it might make different sense, Catherine, to approve these resolutions after we've completed the agenda. They talk about bank account, the officers, setting the fiscal year of the corporation, giving us authorization to actually file the IRS application. So there are just a lot of pieces that you need to authorize. So, but I think once we've had the other discussions, then you'll be more prepared to ratify all of those resolutions.
The way we kind of three initial.
And what we have from the 3 initial directors, well, we'll get 2 signatures, we have all 3.
No, we need Dr. Roizen, if you're on the phone, can you send us your signature? Or
I will
the
send you-
resolution?
I will send you my signature.
Fair enough.
So Holly reminds me, we set this up so the 3 original directors could ratify. But I think as we go through, the agenda today, there'll be some of these issues that get discussed and some action will be taken that we'll have to reflect as well. Starting with the next item 4. Which is the action to specifically elect the provisional officers. Catherine Whittington has agreed to be the provisional chair, and we're using the word provisional because we have yet to adopt a code of regulations which will set forth the terms and the staggering of the terms and all of the officers that you might want to have. But since we haven't yet adopted a code of regulations, we just needed these essential officers in order to get certain things done. So these are the folks who volunteered for this work. And so Catherine volunteered to be the provisional chair. We have Larry Kidd sitting here, who is the guy who helped us get our EIN. But I think his position is provisional treasurer, secretary, sorry. And Dr. Rosen is the provisional treasurer. So that's where we are at this point. So I think we need a motion to select those people unless someone else wants to throw their name in.
Exactly.
I should make a motion.
Um,
Ratify Secretary Treasurer Chair as identified.
Jeanette Wurst, Vicky, I'll second.
Any discussion?
Thank you all for volunteering.
And I'll say they've done a pile of work so far.
Okay, we'll call for a vote now. don't have the roster of people.
Can we do by acclamation?
I'm sorry to hear.
Can we do by acclamation since there's no
Yeah.
other candidates?
So, raise your hand.
All in favor?
I see hands up on the screen, and, if you're on the phone, just say yes.
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 Any opposed?
Say that.
Congratulations.
And thank you very much. You want to? Say,
Sure.
I want to introduce Leah, but tell about Leah's role, basically.
Okay, great. So first, I think, Chris, are you on the line? I got a note from you that we couldn't hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay, great. We can hear you as well. Welcome. Okay, so first, would like to introduce Leah McHugh, who many of you have been receiving lots of emails from over the last couple of weeks. Sorry. Leah is a team member with Benish, our legal secretary, and she's just been great in helping us get organized. Benish has taken over the administrative functions of the foundation until we can get this thing up and running. And so please feel free to reach out and utilize Leah as a resource as well as us, of course.
I'm here. Email me any questions. I can find answers. Happy to help.
She's here to help us get organized and stay on track.
Thank you, Leah.
Sure. So the next item is the website. So as you know, this is a brand new foundation. We don't even have a bank account, which is something that we're going to talk about today. That means that we haven't been able to do just sort of the basic functions of an organization. One of those has been, how do we best get information out to you guys and to the public? So we're hoping we took some steps. We reviewed a couple of proposals for just establishing a basic online presence. And we had the Benish IT team review those two proposals. We would like to make a recommendation today that we move forward with. The company is called Trust Digital. And I'm happy to share this with you as well, but here are the basics. Again, this is just very basic online presence to help us get started. They have very kindly agreed to start the work and allow us to bill them later so that we can at least get things going before we have cash in the bank. So that would have to be included in the agreement. So this would include a domain registration. Should probably approve a domain name today. So I can go through a couple in just a moment. An email account setup. As you know, right now, a lot of email communication is sort of admittedly haphazard. So some coming to Marty, to me, to Leah, to the chair. So we want to make sure that there's one portal for receiving and sending information. And then a website build out and just a basic logo so that, there's an identifier for the foundation.
And a place to post.
And then, yes, a place to upload files. And if we wanted to do, that's certainly where we would house notices and other information. As you know, we do have set up the share file, which is our Ford internal account. So if you haven't already accessed that, or if you've had trouble accessing that, please let us know. But that's where we'll, at least for the time being, house the board information. But again, in the spirit of transparency, we want to make sure that we're posting available documents to the public as well. And this website will allow us to do that. So the quote is for, it's 3,000. And that would include all of the above items. That there would be a couple of ongoing expenses related to that. $30 a month is for website posting, and then $8 a month for any additional emails that we would want as well. But I think we would like to request a motion or open the floor to any questions, comments about moving forward with what we see as a very important initial step of the organization.
This is Hudson. I'll make a motion to approve.
But we can, I'll second, but then I have a question.
Okay.
Moved and seconded. Go for your question.
I would just say, having paid to have a lot of websites built, that's a great price. I was wondering, does their price include modifying the website as, okay, so if we
Yeah.
want to add things, subtract things, they do that for us?
They can either do it or they can do a training so that we can do it ourselves. Yes, great question.
I would also encourage locking down similar website names
Yeah.
so that person who makes a mistake, they can still be directed to our site, but also keep people from pirating the site.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point. Just actually recently, in the last couple of months, somebody went ahead and purchased some of the, what we would think of as the most normal
Desirable website.
website, yeah. So, they are not, some of the ones that we would like to have are not available. Some of them have a cost attached to them, like oneohio.com is already taken. I don't know that we want a .com. We think a .org is preferable anyway. So here's a couple that are available. There's oneohiorecoveryfoundation.com, oneohiofoundation.com, oneohiorecovery.com, oneohiorf.com, and then this is the one that I think we would recommend, which is oneohiorf.org.
I'm sorry.
oneohiorf.org.
Somebody bought all the .orgs related to this, and they did it recently, and they want a lot of money. We're not advising that we pay that. If we can have something.
Well, and honestly, that's why I was making not the motion, but the content that I was,
Yeah,
I was hoping to be somebody.
Only, it's been my experience that the shorter the domain name, the better, because we had long domain names in years past with some of our businesses, and it becomes very challenging to get emails because people get up there or something, so.
yeah.
Do we know if like Ohio, just Ohio recovery, anything along that line has been taken yet?
Let's see.
Leaving the one off?
No, but we can certainly ask, like,
Any suggestions you have today, we can check it out and see what's available.
yeah.
What about maybe the number one?
I tried that one. It's already taken.
This will be pretty short.
Yeah. I thought the same thing.
My goal
People
is to,
still might type
Can
in.
we make can we make a motion that you accept the onerecoveryrf.org if we don't have a better one so that you can proceed even if we don't have a meeting?
Second that.
So it's one of
We have a motion on the floor.
Yes.
I would second that motion. Greta Mayer.
Put your hand.
Two motions now on the tape, on the floor, so.
the first one is to, do we go with this provider for a website? That first.
So we have two motions on the floor. I'd like to get the first one addressed, which is the motion to move forward with the website company.
I know that we already had a motion by Hudson and a second by Berkler to do that.
Christopher Smitherman, I have one question before we take that vote.
Picture up, maybe that'll help.
Go ahead, Christopher.
So the question is regarding security of the site. I've had problems with my own personal sites recently. And so do they provide, like if someone does something to the site or creates a site that makes people think it is our site and it's not the authentic site, you know, who will handle that security of the site?
That's kind of two questions, I think, if I might, Catherine. The first question is how much security they have from hacking, and I think that's something we'll have our IT folks talk to them about. because they'll have the language for doing that. I think that's a valid question, and we can do a motion with the, assuming we're all satisfied with the security. The other question in terms of locking up is really how do we keep people from poaching? And that's an intellectual property question. I have some thoughts of, I mean, someone's already taken the domain names, but we can, from a state perspective, trademark certain other names that are, protect trade names under state law, not trademarks, that's a federal thing. But you can protect trade names under state law. And I thought that we should probably do that to keep people from, quite frankly, using those domain names that they purchased for the sole reason that they want to hold us up for money. But I need to have it, I need to look at the list of what we want to take, quite frankly, as a trade name, and talk to my intellectual property folks about it. But I've got a part of a plan, Christopher.
So if I
Thank you.
could jump, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, if I could jump in, I understand that things being taken, but if I'm out there Googling later on, maybe looking, to put in a grant application, RF means nothing to me. So, you might pass this on a temporary basis and then see what else might be out there. I know they're going to be working on the website, but that wouldn't mean anything. And I agree with whoever the gentleman was that said shorter is better. My 2
So
cents.
OneOhioFoundation.com is available. It's just, the .com.
Yeah, that is, though.
It is available. It wasn't like,
I mean, I like that, and I like just OhioRecoveryFoundation.org, if that's open, and leaving the one off.
Probably being involved as we speak. Do we want to make a decision on the motion to go with the provider?
Yes, so can we go back to the very first motion, which was to approve to hire Trust Digital? We have a first and a second, and we will go ahead and do a raise of the hands again. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Holly, you'll go ahead and make that connection
and we'll review the contract with NI towards cybersecurity.
Say that louder so that they can.
Sorry, yeah, we will make sure that the contract is negotiated to include, first of all, that we will be making delayed payments so that we can get this started immediately. And the second is that we will work with our IT folks, and ensure that there are strong cybersecurity protections in place as part of the agreement.
Perfect. Thank you. So there was a second motion that wound up on the floor.
Relative to the name.
Name.
Is it makes some sense because we've had great suggestions that we get those checked out in the next day or two. And then let people know, let the board know what's available, and get some preferences. At the end of the day, we might just have to pick the closest thing that we can get. But we'll at least have some input on that, so that we can get a domain name and lock it down and get going.
Holly, Holly, what were the cost again for the?
Give you the power through us.
So, oneohio.org, I thought made the most sense. There is an organization that has that, that already has the domain. We reached out to them to see if they'd be willing to sell and didn't hear back.
I mean, of the ones that you mentioned.
Yeah.
What is the cost?
Oh, the ones that we mentioned are, they're not, it's nothing.
So
It's very inexpensive.
why don't we just secure 2?
Always
Yeah.
secure 10.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
It's not gonna hurt us.
Right.
Get it,
Right, go get everything that's even close, if it's cheap, right?
Mhm.
Go get everything that's even close, and then we can pick from whatever's available.
And then we can release the other ones or keep them. We decide to do that.
Is there any other suggestions?
I would just like to offer 2 cents here. Greta Mayer, Region 14. I was thinking I like the shorter and sweeter in the oneohio.org, and simply because we know the governor already has a Recovery Ohio group. And so if you throw in the word recovery, I think it may confuse people with that other group that's been in existence for some time, attacking the behavioral health issues to date. And then also, while we're in a period of recovery, obviously from the epidemic, it may limit people's understanding that some of the grant funding could go for prevention activities, as well as interdiction and other things. So I worry a little bit about throwing recovery in there, that it may limit people's understanding of the potential for prevention and other really important activities that could be funded through the foundation.
Any other thoughts?
I agree.
Yeah, I think those were great comments, that we can focus on the One Ohio and maybe the foundation, some sort of
Agree.
company. And eliminate the recovery. I think that's great.
I heard some agrees of the remotes. Okay, well, we'll find out what we can lock down at this point, and then just kind of get some chat going about it.
We have a motion.
Should we make a motion to give them approval?
Well, there's Leah, did you catch the second motion that was actually?
The second motion regarding the name,
Yes.
I mean, it never went anywhere.
Okay,
We decided to look into it further, see what else is available.
okay.
So is the person who made that motion okay with us just going forward and looking at what's available and getting some input on the choices that are out there and then locking something down based on that input?
I think Greta had started to make a
This
motion.
is Dr. Roizen. The answer is yes.
Thank you. Greta, I think you were talking, but, okay, thanks, because you were on mute.
I was agreeing. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a plan and just, watch your email for where we are, what happens once because, this is a dynamic situation.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. We need to take a vote. Hang on, we
No,
we don't have the motion.
have that second.
Okay.
We're
We're just
go
gonna,
forward as we discussed.
Maybe we should table the motion.
thank you.
Vote to table. Why don't, if that's okay with everybody, I would move that we table, and to our next meeting, table the motion.
Second the motion at the table.
Yes, if there's any objection.
Any objections?
Well, you're not gonna be at risk of losing the domains of them. No, you'll go ahead and secure them.
Yeah, no, it's just the motion that
Right.
we.
We're just
decide,
tabling.
We're gonna go figure out what we can get. Do some
Are there any objections
table.
to tabling till next month, allowing Benish to go ahead and secure as many names? Variety of names.
I would just say we might have to move more quickly. Somehow we've got to empower a smaller group to make the decision in a pronto. Otherwise, somebody might lock us out of that recommendation. So I'm happy with the smaller group of treasurer, secretary, executive director, or chairman. I'm happy with this. Make the decision.
So is there anyone else with some expertise and skill or interest in this that wants to join that
That
group?
would like to be part of that
Because we
group.
could, we could circulate what's available and just take some consensus on that. And then if you want to empower us to actually make the purchase, we would like advice on doing it. That's probably the easiest way to say it.
So securing domain names is what we're talking about.
Right.
And is there a cost to securing the domain names? That was the question.
Yes, it's limited. It's usually, $50 a month.
So I'll make a
But it
motion that we
depends.
authorize up to $500 to secure domain names and that we authorize the chairman to do that.
A second.
Any further discussion on the names.
So the motion to authorize the chairman to expand up to $500 in security domain name rights.
Correct.
There's a second if we don't already have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
I'm sorry, was that motion by Mr. Kidd or was
There
that
was
Mr.
Mr.
Fix?
Fix.
Fix, Mr. Fix.
Sorry, I'll say my name next time.
Okay, I need.
Whatever
yeah,
our
we gotta
name
place
is.
Fix.
Cool.
So, do you have anything else under the website? Because I'd like to bring messaging. I would like to put forward, we, as the group needs to really look at messaging and having a message regarding the foundation and regarding the process that we're going through and making sure that it's consistent, concise, and having all of the regions projecting that same message. So I would be looking for someone who maybe has some marketing background, messaging background, anybody who wants to message. To help with that piece. This is another just piece to being invested in the foundation. And making sure that we have that consistent message across the board.
We have a substantial and growing list of what we call our stakeholders list, because some of you may recall that when we got this remit from the AG, we started reaching out to folks to find out what was going on in the region. That is a list that Leah keeps, and all of the stuff that all the board packets are going out. That is, Hannah News yesterday published a short story in which they told people, you know, if you want to be on the notification list, here's the email address. But once we have this website, I anticipate that list will grow, and once we have the website up, there'll be not only places to post notices, but to the message about what the foundation is doing. And, you know, when we get to the point of having a grant process in place, you know, people want to know. So there's a lot of messaging to be done. We need a small group of people who are willing to work on that and then identify if we need to, you know, fund them or something to work on it with us. But
Great. Thank you, Tilly.
So, if I may. As we go through the day today, we're starting to build the foundation of our structure. And we're going to talk at some point today about hiring or putting together a group that will hire someone from the organization. And we've seen that part of our structure will be someone that handles public information, right? So I think I understand what you're talking about now is someone who will help us communicate back to the regions and to the public in the gap between today and the time that we have a public information officer.
Right.
I think, I mean, that we're going to have a report from the work group that's been looking at the executive director. We haven't gotten to the point, although we quickly need to, sort of looking at what all that hiring structure needs to be in order to keep positions. And that, you know, people need to take on that work. Ideally, you'd like to have an ED in place before you put other people in place. How quickly we can get that done, it's a real issue. So, but you're absolutely right. We need a staffing structure.
And that, and the staffing structure, I'm just gonna be honest, it's gonna take time. So we need, that's why it's so important that these working groups, we get to people on them to volunteer and be part of that, because it's going to take time. We have to look for a firm. We have to vet out the firms. We have to put RFP out for that. We have processes in place that are going to take quite some time to find that person and get them in place. In the meantime, the foundation still has things to do. We still have to be messaging. We have to do that public information. There's a lot of work to be done. And I'm not trying to overwhelm everybody, but this group of ladies right here have been doing it all. And we need to step up and help.
I'm happy to help you with the communication piece.
Thank you.
I might suggest that our digital company that we selected, I think that we can,
Engage them.
Yeah, I think that as part of building the website, I'm sure there'll be an information page, so I'm sure that they can help us at least with that initial. And so, if there's anyone that would like to volunteer, I have Region 15 and Jeff as two volunteers, but at least to maybe it's a focus group sitting down to help guide the messaging.
So if there's anyone else that would like to help with that, you can just reach out to us and we'll shoot on that. Thank you, Jeff and Julie. Outstanding regional appointments.
Yeah. Still have
Oh, I know that Region 3 has made their regional board appointments and are working through their process. So we expect that Region 3 will have an appointee very soon. So the only outstanding regions that we have, Region 6, actually, I think that's the temporary appointment that we just got. So we have a temporary appointment now for Region 6. Region 16 then, I believe, is the only one out, sort of, that we really haven't. Yeah, that's up in the far northwest corner.
So if you can't hear Polly, Region 16 is still missing in action up in the northwest part of the state. So if anybody wants to reach out and encourage them.
Maybe Senator McCauley, if you're on the line still, you might be helpful to us with that endeavor.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so Region 16 is still outstanding. We don't have a board member. It's in the northwest corner of the state that I think it includes some of your counties, so you might be helpful in helping us move them along.
Have a regional structure at all that we're aware of. So it's been an information desert for us, so if you can help, we really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Will the
Holly, why don't
County
you give me a
Commissioners
call?
Association be of any help?
They have been helpful. Yeah, they continue to be helpful.
Holly, why don't you call me some point after the board meeting and we can connect offline and see how I might how I might be able to help out with this.
Okay, thank you. Hang on, I just got another Region 16. That's okay. So Region 6.
Well, one of those three,
Yeah.
what's, there's anything.
So Region 16 has a temporary.
Yeah, so it's Region 6, it's not, and that's Stark County. So we can, actually, Representative Pepley, do you have Stark County at all? Do not have Portage, okay. Okay, but we can do some outreach there, and I know that HHL.
Okay.
Here. Michael Beasley says he'll be direct. Oh, that's Northwest.
Okay.
Okay. So next is outstanding regional appointments. We covered that. Tax exemption application.
It's very brief. We are working on it. I think Julia's she's on observing at some point. But she's working on it, to get it filed. We've got, we're gonna talk about, pulling the code of regulations together later, but that's the piece. Now that we've got almost all of the regions, we've got a draft code for, that will come around for your approval in the near term. We'll be in a position to file. This is, as I've said before, not going to be one of those just fill in the blanks applications. There's going to be an argument that goes with it for all the reasons we've discussed previously. So it's going to take some time to put the package together. But we are a lot closer now that we have these appointments, and we've got a code that I think we'll be able to latch onto shortly. So it's the update on the tax exemption application.
Director and officers insurance policy, and Marty, you invited
I did.
Rick to talk with us.
There were questions raised at the last meeting about how you all were protected from a liability perspective. So I asked Rick Bursman from the Keaton Agency, who was a gentleman with whom I've worked for, I don't know, 30 years. He insures a lot of my clients, and he's on board, he's on board of one of the larger charitable institutions here in Columbus, and he understands the nonprofit world. Graciously consented to come and talk to you guys about what insurances you might need for this organization. So is that enough of an introduction, Rick?
You want me up there?
Yeah, wherever you're comfortable and where people can hear you.
I'll stay here. Can everyone hear me? I know my voice is a little nasal.
Well, where's the microphone?
It's all over.
Okay.
You okay? I've done, as Marty mentioned, we've worked together probably 30 years. Insure nonprofits with 2 or 3 employees and an annual budget of $100,000, upwards of 250 employees and $40 million budget. So I do have a strong base of that, working with nonprofits and corrections.
Can you speak up? We're having trouble. I'm having trouble hearing.
I'm sorry. Yeah. These are the microphones.
Yeah, they're up here.
Oh, they're up above us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the table.
And
Sorry, start again.
The one,
so maybe.
These owls, yeah, here.
What if he could move and just.
Yeah, just come up here, because these owls should pick you up.
Just part of the microphone back.
Is this it here?
Yeah.
As I said, Marty and I have worked together probably about 30 years. I have a broad background in working with nonprofits, community corrections, community healthcare services. Oh, on and on. We probably represent 70 different nonprofits. What I've done on a page that I hope everybody has.
There was a handout. I don't know that all of you got it.
So just a simple spreadsheet. And I'm going to work from left to right. The most important thing that we've talked about, Holly, myself, and Marty, is getting directors and officers liability in place as soon as possible. And the real barrier to that is getting your nonprofit status from the IRS. Once that happens, then I can talk to insurance companies representing or at least providing a profile of the organization and what your mission is and the structure. But a policy will not get issued by any insurance company that underwrites directors and officers liability until the status is obtained. So that's number one. The good news is directors and officers policies for nonprofits are provided what we call prior acts coverage. So the work you're doing today, the decisions you're making today as the board will be covered, obviously, depending on the allegations and the excuse me, I'll steal your term, the gadfly that presents it. So as soon as you can get that done, I can start a serious negotiation or discussion with underwriters. The other issue in the directors and officers marketplace, let's call it, is limits. And I don't know how you're going to come up with a limit. I do a lot of private enterprise as well. How much is enough? How much do you buy? What is the surplus of the business? And of course, what you're going to have assets that are going to flow to you over the years. So that's going to be a discussion probably for your finance committee, perhaps your audit committee, obviously your executive director. Once you get those people in place, and I'd be glad to, consult and share whatever information I have, or do some homework to help guide you a little bit there and make those decisions. So in general, every act, what they call a wrongful act, everything you've done this morning prior to my presentation could be subject to litigation in some way, shape, or form. The other thing that's available in the marketplace now is coverage called Side A liability, which is a supplement to directors and officers liability that protects you as individuals if the policy, if the primary policy gets exhausted through litigation or tied up in litigation. So that's really important, especially with the type of money you'll be distributing, receiving, and managing, be responsible for. So, and by the way, I'm trying to get through all of this in about 20 minutes and leave about 10 minutes for some questions and answers, if any of you have them. Holly's going to give me this sign when we get to 20 minutes. So in order of priority, I'm moving from left to right. Errors and omissions coverage or professional liability would be for the actual work that the foundation does in setting up your grant programs and accepting grants and evaluating grants and awarding grants. So I feel once that process starts, that's coverage that I would certainly recommend that you buy, but certainly consider and put a lot of thought and decision making on whether you should buy it, which you should, or whether or not. So cyber liability, you already started down that process with the just getting your website. Things that are going on in cyber liability today in private business as well as public is just insane. There isn't enough time to discuss it this morning. My former neighbor was the head of the FBI office here in Columbus for years. He's been retired about 4 years. When he retired, 80% of their time was spent on, he used to call it chasing the bad guys. Now they've got tech people that just huge numbers of people working on cyber crime. So, and that's a broad scope of coverage. A lot of it has to do with ransomware. If people know you have large amounts of money, that spills over into the decisions you make about where you put your funds eventually and how you manage them on a day-to-day basis. And as you can see, a lot of these things, these coverages overlap. Fiduciary liability is another type of coverage that is usually maintained only to protect the trustees of a plan for the management of employee benefits. So although your assets are going to be your employees, of course, and the funds that flow into the organization. So I'm kind of guessing here, to be honest with you, not that I'm always honest, not always honest. Trustee liability is important. So the individuals that accept that responsibility as trustees of funds, if you go that way, and even just for your pension plan, or if you have a retirement plan, that's a small piece of this puzzle. What we generically refer to as crime insurance is carried in the private sector and the public sector. Employee dishonesty, which is straight embezzlement. You have an employee that embezzles funds, steals assets from the company, cash or even physical assets in the private sector. Depositors forgery. I'm sure every transaction that this organization will do money will be handled electronically, I would imagine, other than simple day-to-day funds perhaps. But you're also going to be handling there'll be third-party funds going back and forth, I would assume. Once those committees are set up, someone needs to really evaluate how that money is transferred through different organizations to your bank, in the bank, out of the bank. What are the security backups for signing off on checks and things like that? I mean, it's all standard business practices in many ways, but when you start tying your systems people in with managing the money and dual access to accounts, two-signature approval on disbursement of funds, things like that. Once again, all these different coverages, or several of these coverages overlap. What I call standard lines are just your basic, once you get an office, fire insurance on the office equipment you buy, liability insurance that your landlord requires you to buy. Doubt if you buy vehicles, but if you bought a vehicle, you'd need a commercial auto policy. Things like that. An umbrella policy, you'd need to go for workers' comp into the Ohio Fund. Sometimes there are bonds that are required. And then here's another example. Employment practice liability as you start hiring individuals or using an outsourced staffing firm or executive search firm. You can also buy employment practices liability coverage in your directors and officers liability as well. So pretty much in general, that is what I wanted to take you through left to right across the column. And then, I'd be glad to provide any other information or help that you might need along the way.
And for those folks who are attending remotely, we'll stay on this and get it out to you, but we don't have the capacity to do it. Do you happen to have it electronic?
I do, yeah. I'll send it to you or Holly.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get it out to you. It's just basically a chart that reflects all of the things that it's been talking about.
Yes.
Did you say we are currently covered even though we haven't?
No, you
You're
do not.
not.
As we sit here today, there's no policy in force. I've had some discussions with 4 or 5 director and officers liability underwriters I know. I shared them the MOU, and then, I told them I have this meeting and where you're at along the process of getting things up and going. So I have no formal discussions. I think that would be my next step, would to be put together as a preliminary application to share, with your permission, of course, to share with underwriters, just to get a response on interest in whether they're interested in working with us or your organization, I should say. There's a stigma out there in my business about opioid and recovery. If we went to any of the companies that any of you recognize here in Ohio, Grange Mutual, Encompass, which used to be Motors Mutual, the smaller Midwestern, what we call mutual companies, they don't even write directors and officers, so we'd be dealing with national companies or what we call specialty insurance companies that they only write directors and officers liability or profession liability.
And you said that we would need the 501(c) status before?
Yeah, in fact, I didn't answer your question completely. Once the day we write a policy, let's say Marty said, oh, Rick, by the way, we got this. I fill out an application, we find an insurance company, let's say we said, let's go with the first one that would underwrite us. The day they issue that policy will have full prior acts coverage. It's actually a clause in the insurance policy. It would go back to this date, to the decisions you're making. So it's almost like it's not backdating, but it understands that you folks have to put this organization together. You have to make some decisions, just like you guys did this morning, simple ones, but it'll be more meaningful as you go on. So that would be retroactive for the things you're doing, picking a bank, picking an investment firm, hiring that executive. So did that answer your question? Yeah.
Would that apply to all the types of coverage you're talking about here?
No. I'm glad you asked that. This is what we call claims made coverage. It's the same type of coverage that a bank would buy, another nonprofit organization, a private entity. So I'm glad you asked that. The other lines of coverage are the contracts, the wording a lot different. Yeah, and
So
they are.
we have a nonprofit corporation created.
Yeah.
We'll shortly be filing the exemption application. So putting aside the D&O, which I understand we actually have to letter from the IRS before they'll issue the D&O. these other lines would be available because we're a nonprofit corporation and we can buy insurance.
Well said. They would be available. I could get, let's say you had an executive director today. You voted on and he or she hired 2 staff people. Maybe they brought 2 people along with them, like they do on the private side, you know, the president will bring executives along with sometimes. We could apply for professional liability if you decided to buy professional liability for the grant making and the operations side. And that would be the same type of claims made coverage. But the regular liability, like for premises liability for the leases, that's a little different form. It's much easier to underwrite. And so I could have that in place in days. If you had a couple $100,000 worth of computer equipment, office furniture, and a lease in hand. That piece, the standard, what I call standard lives, you can move quickly on that.
Any other questions?
This is Armin Budish from Cuyahoga County. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Morning, Arthur.
Morning. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to Holly and Leah and whoever else for making this information available. I think I had raised a question about this in our first meeting. And it's very helpful, and I would strongly urge that we get broad coverage as soon as we can. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
What board action is required to move this process forward?
I think what I heard is for you to fill out a preliminary application. Can you maybe explain that to the board?
How was that? I heard that part. I'm saying, what do we need to do as a board to authorize that?
I think we can move forward with consensus when it comes to the time presenting to the board, here are the options, here's the price, then you'll need some action. But I don't think there's an action right now, which that's what we'll investigate. Or do you need something in order to?
As long as, however you folks want to handle it, if you're comfortable with me talking to underwriters now and sharing information, then the information we've already talked about anyhow, you've already shared. I could do that. There'd be no commitment on anyone's part. I just want to make sure that, you know, that you folks are comfortable with me moving forward to do that. There's no commitment, but you know, it's just underwriting like you would a bank loan or any other insurance application. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I would not move without you folks saying we're comfortable with that, so.
Important to keep the process.
Yeah, and there's a possibility we could say, well, we'll give you $1 million worth of coverage. Then I would have to go to the other, maybe what we call a secondary market or other market and say, look, I have $1 million in coverage here, place for this organization. What would you want for it? 2 million or 3 million or 4 million? And so that's another part of getting you folks comfortable or helping you figure out, what do you want to buy? I struggle with that every day. I insure 18 or 19 insurance companies. I kind of use the same format and they buy the same coverages and the board just struggles with, you know, they have $100 million in surplus or 20 million in surplus and how much do you buy? What limit do you buy? And I haven't seen a formula yet. So.
Well, we can probably gather some information from some of our friends at other large community foundations and see.
Yeah, that would be great help to me. And, you know, let's say that that first tranche of money came in today and it was $15 million. I would argue against buying $15 million worth of coverage. You know, it just doesn't make sense. But, you know, it's something, we're always a work in process to get that first policy issued.
Do organizations generally, you know, purchase escalated as their assets grow?
They do. They do. I mean, this is such a unique situation because it's mostly cash. And you know, other organizations, especially on the private side, well, even with any other growing organization, their asset base. It's an asset underwriting process, even with physical assets, bricks and sticks, buildings and working capital, things like that. So, but yeah, the answer is yes, you can build on that. And you maybe get through that first year with a couple million, in coverage, and then you'll figure that out. You'll get a comfort level for that once you get other people in place, that, the people, the executive director and staff and things. Yes, sir.
I agree with the direction you're going in terms of trying to negotiate. You really can't take bids per se, because a lot of times you have to first structure what package you're trying to put a bid on. So I like the idea of trying to negotiate. To me, when we start accepting or getting cash is when we have to worry about such things as cyber crimes in terms of fund transfer, third-party funds, wire transfers. Those are where you really get into risk. Do you have any idea how much at any one time we might have in terms of, was it 85 million, or how much was it we might have projected over the life of the foundation to have at any one time?
Oh, at any one time, I haven't seen an estimate on that. What they've told us is the first tranche is going to be something between 15 and 18 million dollars. If you think about this, what I don't know is how many years that represents, because the distributors have been sitting on this money for a bit of time while this has all been playing out. So I don't know what the annual is, but we could just divide 455 million by 18 and use that as a working number.
Well, that's what really affects the premium on that category. That's why I was wondering what the matching might have.
You're right. It is a premium driver.
Yeah, because I've actually been a part of it board that had cybercrime taking 150,000. So really have to watch what you have in account.
Yeah. And that every time you guys mention something, it triggers something for me. On the cybercrime, most of the underwriters now are not the companies we would all know of, Hartford, Travelers, those types of companies. There are specialty underwriters who are what we call InsurTech. The minute we order coverage, they get permission to go right into your system, and they can check it within 48 hours to see if there's, I call them crawlers, but there are cyber crawlers out there that are looking for back doors to get into your system. And we're starting to get more and more of it. Just in the last year, we've had five-figure claims. A lot of those are small business, but it's just a bizarre environment out there. So keeping those back doors closed and the support, the technical support you get for free as part of your policy premium is pretty impressive, I think. So thanks again.
Marty, is there anything that we can go by on past foundations that you've worked with? And secondly, is there anything in our bylaws or foundation, whatever the state gave us to form the foundation, that's protective for the foundation?
Answering the latter question, there's nothing in the MOU that is going to guide us in this. I think what I'm thinking about doing at this point is reaching out to some of the larger foundations and see what their insurance package looks like. I'm thinking the Columbus Foundation and some of the similar community foundations, and maybe talk to Philanthropy Ohio, which is the trade association for all of them, and see whether we can get some comparative data. Because most of my clients are operating organizations that are they're insuring against a whole lot of other kinds of risks. And while they have significant assets, they don't have $450 million for the most part, except for some of the larger foundations that we do some work for. And I'll make inquiries. But anybody else who's got a connection to their community foundation, where they could have a chat with them about what kind of coverages they have, go for it.
Armin, do you have, for the Cleveland Foundation, do you have connections there, or should I try and do that? You're
Armin?
muted.
I think you're muted. Somebody.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
It's only been about 2.5 years. I'm still learning how to mute and unmute. The answer is I do have good connections with the Cleveland Foundation, and I'd be happy to make a call or two if that's desirable.
That would be, I would really appreciate that, because, you know, any information you can get about the types of coverage, and we will send you, as soon as I get the electronic version of this sheet, we'll send it to you so you have something to talk with them about. That would be really helpful. I think I might be able to elicit that from the Cleveland Jewish Federation as well, but I'll see. I heard
Marty,
somebody
hi,
asked-
it's Jane Portman here. I should put my hand up. I know it's Jane Portman, and I've got some connections at the Greater Cincinnati Foundation. I'd be happy to reach out there too. So will you please send the same information to me so I can ask the pertinent questions, but I'm happy to handle that.
Absolutely.
All right, I just sent it to you guys.
Thank you.
I just did that myself.
Oh, so. Holly just took a picture of it and turned it into a PDF and sent it to you. So if you can read it, if you can't read it, let us know, because we still want the, we still want the original, because it'll be clear. I haven't gotten that far technologically yet.
All right, any other discussion regarding the insurance? Go on and we'll just, everybody will keep moving forward on the investigation of insurance policies. Thank you. Next is our working groups, and this is where we are going to be looking for board members to step up and join one of the working groups so that we can actually start working through the processes that need to be in place. The first one is the hiring work group, which I think we have a member, two members?
Two members.
Two members. Oh, we're all three.
Yeah, I'm already in here.
Beautiful. Would you like to report out, Larry?
Sure.
And could you let us know who the members are on the hiring committee?
Tom, Dwayne, Christy, and, Dr. West.
Thank you. And I think Greta Mayer also signaled that she would be interested in joining.
I'm sorry.
Greta Mayer. Yep. Okay.
Oh, here he is. That screen, huh?
So our committee met on Monday. It was our first meeting, so a lot of information gathering. Marty was at the meeting and she helped provide some information that was very helpful. We're very, very early in the stage, but we did determine that we want to develop an RFP, which Marty gave us a couple samples of RFPs for search firms, so we can officially engage in a search firm. She also gave us, I don't know, 4 or 5 names of search firms that we can approach and discuss. We did discuss that we're going to need a job description. We discussed salary briefly. And, you know, what the qualifications are for this, you know, this new position. Do you gentlemen have anything to add?
I think so. I mean, we need to find a search firm who will guide us on a lot of those questions. I see a lot of locals started to refine some questions that we'll use to guide our selection search.
As I read where the salary was also already sort of defined in terms of what range it was, right?
It has been, but there's some discussion about, is that the right one? Is it competitive? And we'll let the search firm help us find out where we need to be, and, you know, if not, then we'll go back and see what else we can do.
Totally agree with you. The job scales have changed dramatically in the last 6 months. We're running into that.
We thought we would take our cues from the search firms who place people like this all the time, and
Search firms get paid on a percentage.
You could do a retained search also,
Recommend that.
like, and for a position that's likely to pay. Marty, do you have anything to add?
Well, I'm just thinking about this, is what's the sense of the board in terms of, once there's a recommendation on the search firm? I mean, I don't want to hold process up, I'm going to wait for a board meeting if you all come up with the recommendation for a search firm. So what's the board's sense?
Well, I would think before we did anything that the board would need to approve the RFP before it's all in. So there would have to be board action for the approval of the RFP to then be sent for a search firm to actually saw that.
Do we have the ability to vote electronically or not?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Do we have the ability to vote electronically?
We have, yes, we have the ability. Here's the catch, because again, the MOU wanted a private entity, so we have a not-for-profit foundation and corporation, and 1702 is the chapter that governs us. And what it says is if you are going to take an action without a meeting, you have to have 100% participation and 100% consent in a writing. Now, the email can be the writing. I advise clients this all the time. It's a great shock to them. The email can be the writing because we can save the email for corporate records. But we need everybody on board, everybody to vote. It's certainly doable, but we do have, potentially a 28-member board. So we have to pay attention.
All right, so is there an ability to call for a board meeting via Zoom with 24-hour notice, and we're gonna vote on these 3 topics, and here's your packet, and
1702 gives us all the latitude we need to call meetings.
so given those 2 opportunities, right? When things like this come up, we need to approve the RFP, and then once we have the RFP, we need to approve, who's gonna do the search for us. Waiting for a monthly meeting, I agree, doesn't make sense, it just slows down the process. But giving blanket authorization to a small group also kind of doesn't make sense if we have the ability to call a Zoom meeting, get a quorum, cover, 20 minutes worth of topics, have a vote, and go on about our day.
How long do you think, anyone in the work group can answer this? Do you think it's going to take you to put the RFP together?
We have a sample,
Okay.
So we just.
May I make a comment? I think the board as a whole should decide, one is, there are 2 real important things in the RFP. One is part of the executive director's job to raise additional funds? That is this foundation just to spend the funds we get? Or is it also to look to try and raise additional funds? And secondly, how much of the funding will go to an endowment process versus how much will of the income will be spent immediately? And I think those are 2 important things that need to be in the RFP that we need to guide the search firm on, because it really changes the direction that they go in and the person, whether they are to raise funds or not.
And Dr. Rosen, that also gets to looking at the other staffing, because if there's going to be an effort to do significant fundraising, then you're going to be looking for a development at some point to focus to, because that's what they do for a living. So, but I agree that there's the package of skills needs to be defined by that job description, which is kind of the first thing on the list of things to do.
Question, are we, this is Armand, are we cut off as of whatever it is, June 30th for having remote meetings?
We are of the opinion that we are not, because the almost the first line of the memorandum of understanding says we want a private nonprofit 501c3 foundation, and so we're looking to 1702 and trying to be as transparent as we can. And we prefer in-person meetings just because I think the conversation is a lot easier, and y'all recall getting you all connected and unmuted and figuring out who was there. But I also understand that having a hybrid of this, or in some cases, being able to do actions without a meeting, which are permissible by statute for a private entity, is the way we're going to get this business done. Because otherwise, I think we're going to have a problem. It's going to be a whole lot slower. So there are people in this room who will disagree with our opinion, but, you know, we can all have our opinions. That is the opinion that we have. This is the best way to get it.
I thought it was clear that we're 1702 and we sort of have to quit thinking like we're a governmental entity because we're not a governmental entity. So therefore, those provisions of state law really don't apply to us. We're a foundation.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, 1702 is the chapter that sets up and governs not-for-profit, private not-for-profit corporations, and that's what we're looking to. And in some instances, you know, it conflicts with the MOU. We're not a public institution, and we don't want to be a public institution, so trying to walk those lines.
Thank you.
And just, you know, for purposes of quorum, there are sort of layers to meet a quorum. So it's not just the requisite 18 individuals. There also must be representation from each of the different membership classes. So, you know, there's only 4 legislators that are serving on the board. We need at least one of them to be part of any of those Zoom meetings. And from what we're calling the statewide appointments, we need at least one of you to be on those. I think the metro and the non-metros, because they're much larger groups, it's going to be easier for us to meet. But just to keep in mind and probably mention it to our friends in the legislature, with the sense that they might sort of be the toughest because it's the smallest director class.
And we had the discussion last month about no designees, because the law doesn't allow you as a director to give your fiduciary duty to someone else. There's no provision for that.
So circling back to the hiring process, you have a job description close or you're working on it?
Well, Marty, you said you guys, you all were gonna.
Yeah, that's on my list to get some points together and some draft together and see what I can gather out of it.
Understood. And you have an RFP that you're.
We have a sample that we're reviewing. Okay. So we should, in short order, we should either review it and decide or go a different direction and.
So within the next 2 weeks, you feel like you'll have those 2 pieces?
Well, I can't speak to the job description, but
Well,
I would think the RFP would review.
We'll make that happen.
So then should we schedule a Zoom meeting for 2 weeks out to send those things out? We can review them ahead of time. We can have our Zoom meeting, we can have our discussion, we can have our vote, and we can move forward with the process rather than wait until.
So before we end today, we'll add that to our meetings, when the next board meeting is, when the next Zoom meeting is. We have other groups yet to go
Yeah,
through.
right.
So we'll take care of all of that so that there's things that need to be reviewed and approved. We can do it at one meeting.
Okay.
Move on from there.
Doodle polls are our friends. Over there.
I do have a question. Is the understanding that we are going to hire more than just one executive director? Is that the understanding we have more than one employee?
Well, eventually you're gonna have to have more than one
You're gonna
employee.
we're gonna have to have more than just an executive director. The staff will evolve over time, but I would say almost immediately after you put an executive director in, you're gonna have to have some type of admin assistant in there to help with, I mean, you can't, this is going to be a very overwhelming initial process, and they're going to need assistance with that. Eventually, I think it was Jeff mentioned, we're going to need a public information officer, however that looks, if we're looking for this person to be doing fundraising. You know, there's different components to what a foundation has as far as employees, and I think we're gonna have to work through that, but I would imagine that we would be hiring an assistant shortly after the executive director is in place.
I would also suggest communications is so important that at the same time that admin is hired, that communications person is hired. I think that's gonna be.
Well, we're gonna have, you know, and we're gonna talk next about the financial situation, but we're gonna need some folks who are willing to sit down and put a budget together and, you know, kind of outline a staffing plan in terms of budgetary side of it. We're gonna need somebody, we're gonna have all that money, we gotta have somebody, CFO pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Because we're gonna have to put payroll in place, well, you know, all of that, even before we get the grant process going.
If I may, Catherine.
Yes.
So, there will be a staff, right? I think we all agree to that. Would it not make sense for us to hire the executive director and for that executive director to hire their team?
Yes.
Yes.
So our focus needs to be on that executive director and eventually the structure that goes underneath that person, and they fill out that structure, right?
We have to give them guidance as
Right.
to the structure that we want
Right.
us to have. And then they need to fill those
Yeah.
positions, but I think they would also need us for help with job descriptions.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Well, yeah, we'll create that structure.
Right, but we need to create that initial structure for them.
Yeah.
And obviously, the executive director would most likely have recommendations to the board
Right.
as to maybe certain positions that they definitely feel they need versus positions that they don't need.
Right.
A lot of organizations that I've worked for with, they'll have members of the board participate with the executive director in the interview process, just to help them guide their decisions.
Anything else in regards to the hiring?
I just have a quick question. I'm a little confused on the rest of the employees under the executive director. Are we gonna have to approve the rest of them, or are we gonna leave that to the executive director to basically say, these are the positions I need and these are the people that I recommend, that I would recommend?
Once we have the
to approve?
executive director in place, he or she will work with the board and we will help structure that piece.
Yeah, it's fairly common that certainly, your top officers, the exec's gonna bring people to you and may want board to certainly confirm them and accept them. But in terms of hiring the day-to-day administrative staff, it's generally something that a board delegates to the executive director. And you evaluate the executive director based on how, in part, based on how well they've done that. But you don't want to be on the day-to-day stuff and hiring, sweeping floors, and you don't want to be there. I mean, there's a lot.
Allocating a budget to the executive director after he submits a proposal to us, I assume.
Correct, although I think we may need to have a draft budget before we have an
Before the-
executive
yeah.
director at this point, just something to work with.
It's required.
Yes.
We have to give the IRS a whole bunch of financial data. They ask for it in categories that are puzzling in terms of the way, if you look at a budget, you have certain categories you think about. The IRS has specific interests, so they lump a lot of that together, but because they're really interested in how much you're spending on fundraising and how much you're spending on occupancy, and because they look at the areas where fraud is prevalent in their world. But we still have to have a general budget so that we can fill out the IRS application. And we're in the process of sort of inventing one. There with you, but you're gonna have to.
Excuse me, can I jump in for a moment? This is Executive Shapiro. I just want to make sure that when we're looking for an executive director, that we are open to the term that was used was he will. can we keep an open mind about who that executive might be in terms of being a man or a woman or whatever? I just want to make sure that we have a founding principle that speaks to that.
Term that I heard was he or she.
I heard he, so if I didn't, I apologize. But given with what I heard, I wanted to make sure that we weren't siloing ourselves and eliminating our opportunity to bring the best candidate to the table, regardless of who that was.
Thank you. Okay, I know a few are getting a little restless. Do we need to take 2 or 3 minutes? Or do we wish to continue? I see people moving around. Yes, okay.
Anybody know where the facilities are?
Right out the doorway.
Okay, we'll find it. There's some space at the end of the agenda.
That's okay, but I think any place we need it.
Okay. We're trying to listen and there's conversations going on around me.
Yeah.
Back in. Back in.
So we're early, but you know, I don't. Hey everyone, lunch has arrived. It's just out by the coffee. So if you'd like to grab it and eat while we're doing business, you can grab it on the way out the door, whatever is your preference. Sorry, yes, the lunches are for the board members.
Lunch?
It's lunch.
Yes, it's
So,
like
yeah, 10:45 lunch. It did arrive earlier.
it came early, so
Okay. Okay.
however you want to do it, we will not be offended if people eat while we do business.
So we'll move out. Let's roll, all right. Next up, so we've gone through the hiring work group. Next up is the investment work group. We put together, I know there was a meeting, got people. And probably the number one request here is, will sound like a broken record, but it's for participation. So individuals interested in joining the investment committee, I think that would be very helpful. The 2 priorities, I would say the number 1 priority is that we need to select a financial institution. And we just have to have, you know, the discussion amongst the board members before we can do that. The second is we would like to approve an RFP for, we're still trying to figure out what the terminology is for this position. But it's essentially an independent financial advisors that will help us in the selection of a management firm. So if anyone has an RFP for that type of a position or has experience in hiring that type of an individual, we certainly welcome your participation on the committee.
Or if you have people in your organizations that have such experience, because I mean, it's basically, if you want to think about this, the first thing we need is a depository bank, put the cash in. But we don't want to leave it there very long because it's not going to earn squat sitting in the depository bank. But we need, Benish is not going to select the depository banks for you guys.
Do we anticipate when the money will come in?
As soon as we have a bank account, it should be very soon after that.
Telling us.
We need a bank account in order for us to accept any funds.
It seemed we should choose an Ohio bank or Ohio-based bank. So, other than I know Key Bank and maybe somebody else can suggest others, but they're I would think we should get an Ohio-based bank.
Agreed.
So you have Huntington, Key, and Fifth Third, maybe others?
So who's in charge of this committee? Is there someone?
We don't have anyone in charge.
We have no one in charge of the meeting, of this group. So that was,
So I think Chris was working through whether he was able to participate.
right,
In like a
and
lesson.
I'm on all the committees just because of where I'm sitting. So,
So who's the smartest financial person in on our group? Don't all jump at once. I know it's not me.
Well, and as I said, obviously need board members, but if you have people in your organizations that you could talk into helping with this,
and I think,
like, with this, both processes, because we need the bank now, but we also, and I said this in the last meeting, I'd like to see you go with an independent financial advisor, which is where the RFP part for that comes in. So that you have, otherwise the investment houses are just gonna harass everybody. Because this is a lot of money and they all want to invest it. And you're a not-for-profit organization, you have the prudent investment standards that are set forth in the statute and all the commentary that goes with it from the American Bar Association, but you have investment standards for nonprofits. You want an investment manager who knows how to find those firms. So those are sort of two separate things. And like I said, you don't want this money to sit in a bank or two banks or however many banks they spread it to. For too long without getting some of it invested. So that's our task, and people to step up or find folks for us.
I'm happy to help on selecting a depository and investment manager. I do chair Kent State University's investments, about 540 million investments we manage. So I'm happy to participate in those. I agree. Depositories should be a little bit easier only because you don't have the standards.
And so should we divide it between three banks? Meaning, is the amount of money going to be so significant that we have at any one time that we should have more than one bank?
Your investment will really be, I mean, the bank is just to get it started.
the
Clearing.
right, so basically the financial institution that's chosen is really just to start to have a place to put the money. The actual RFP for an independent financial advisor, once that person is in that, or that organization is in place, they're going to bring the recommendations and where the money needs to go, how it should be divided, where it should be invested, where the best returns are going to come from. So really, I think we're looking for right now just to get a financial institution so that we can say that we're ready to accept the monies.
I would propose, if I can propose, I'd propose that we use Key Bank unless there's another proposal on the, but simple enough. They're not going to have the money very long, it sounds like.
Or they may or may not, depending on what
The financial,
ultimately
right.
is decided, because you're gonna have some liquidity, significant liquidity in the banks ongoing, so.
Well, Huntington also.
You're still gonna need somebody, if a financial institution to pay the bills. Yeah, Tom.
Institutions has a bank,
Right.
the investment arm, I think that will be helpful.
And being based in Columbus might make it. So just
Make a motion to use Huntington Bank for our depository.
We're trying to, you need a financial institution ongoing that will also pay the bills. Opening an account with whichever bank you decide into a sweep account in the short term, so you're getting some money on your investment until you figure out who the financial advisor group is going to be, and then how much you want to keep liquid and how much you want to, give to the advisors. So I think it's a two-step kind of thing. But generally, once you set up an account that pays bills at a bank, that's where you wind up longer term in terms of the banking institution.
So we have a motion on the floor to go with Huntington Bank. And the reason behind,
Since there's a motion before, let's get a discussion. Do we have any idea what they pay us, how often they sweep, what the sweep rate is? My point is, I think Bennett should, well, do an inquiry, the three majors that we just discussed, find out again what the percentage is, what's the sweep rate, all those different points, so that we can in fact, and Huntington might be the company we go with, but I couldn't tell you if they're better than Key or PNC, or excuse me, you don't want to do PNC, Key or, who's the other one?
Third.
Yeah. I mean, all three great, but they, especially as interest rates are going up, some are quicker to pass along interest rates. They're slow, so. Find out.
Can we have a conversation about, I mean, because you've got an idea of all the questions that we need to ask. I'm thinking if we can work with you and you come up with the questions, and we can do the contact and find people in the banks to talk to. But in my wheelhouse, man, a lot of stuff. And but I'm not gonna ask all the right questions without some.
I would suggest that the bank, one of the criteria, have an investment.
I think all three of us do.
Yeah.
Just key, I wasn't aware.
I think they do. But I need so having an investment or being able to do a sweep account so that we're not sitting at the, pennies on a dollar interest rate. We want it to be an Ohio bank. Anything else?
So I'll rescind my motion. Sir, I apologize. I forget your name.
It's just Don Mason.
Don, if you could work with them to get the questions together. And then in the next 2 weeks, when we have our Zoom meeting, if you could have a recommendation for a bank for us.
yep.
Second,
That wasn't a motion.
It is now. I think it is now.
All right, thank you.
May I interject quickly?
Sure.
Christopher Smitherman, I apologize. I'm gonna have to go just due to some care for my daughter. But before I go, I just want to again interject the importance of this broader conversation that I think we all value, which is inclusion. I mean, we've talked today about an executive director, a public information officer, banks, insurance, a search firm. And I think it is very important that we have on the agenda a broad discussion about what inclusion looks like for this nonprofit organization that we're setting up. I'm a governor appointee. I know this is important to the governor. I know a lot of people that are on this phone call. I know it's very important to you. What we don't want to do is get so far down the line, and this committee has not had a thoughtful discussion about what inclusion looks like and how we're going to be intentional about it. And I mean through all aspects of everything that we do. So that's women, that's Latinos, that's African Americans, and any other group, veterans. What does it look like for us? What do we value? As these RFPs are going out, I think it should be a part of the RFP. So the language is in there so people understand what we value in the state of Ohio. And there are so many families impacted. So I just want to say that before I go. And that's not that I think all of us agree with this. I think there's a consensus here around it. But I think we need to bring the right person in. I'm not that person. We need to have someone who has dealt in this space to help us have a thoughtful conversation about how we do this and how we're intentional about it. Thank you so much for allowing me to say that to the committee. And me articulating that I have to go, but I'll wait to see if there's any feedback or questions for me.
Thank you. Do we have any feedback?
I just share with Mr. Smithers that one of the criteria we established in we'll use to review search firms was we wanted some background on their history of creating diverse pools and placing successfully diverse candidates. So we did talk about that on Monday.
Great. I did.
I want to apologize. I just want to make sure these conversations are reflected in the minutes. I know we didn't look at the minutes from the last meeting. I raised it there. I'm raising it, here. And I just want to make sure that I keep this top of mind for the committee. And I promise you, the boards that I've served on, when we let it get away from us, it gets away from us real fast. And so it's important to be intentional from the beginning. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
And I would just like to add, it's Jane Portman. I just want to concur with Christopher and agree with his concern and his intention as we move ahead to be sure that we are really paying attention to the DEI issue and be sure that we are being fair and inclusive every step of the way. So thanks, Christopher.
Thank you, Jane.
Can I just add one thing? A total agreement, it might impact as we move forward, how many banks, how many, because as we move through, in order to be inclusive, sometimes you have to break up contracts and make things more manageable for a minority or women-owned firms. So I just want to throw that out there as a potential strategy as we look forward.
Thank you. All right, so we're ready to move on.
Code of regulations,
Code of regulations.
which is a separate.
You all have a separate handout.
It's not in the big package.
It was a separate one.
It's very long. So we had a brief meeting of group yesterday with Catherine and Josh and myself.
And we had a meeting prior to.
And there was also a prior meeting. I think probably the best approach at this point, unless you want to spend a great deal of precious time going through it, which I don't really recommend, is for everyone to take this back and spend some time with it and look at it. We've adopted things out of the MOU. Some things may seem cumbersome, or you'll wonder where we got them. And the answer to that is read the MOU. We've made some just basic assumptions that you may choose to alter on terms and what officers to have, and come from other backgrounds and other organizations. So whatever you want to bring to the table in terms of suggestions, everybody's going to be happy to listen to. We built in, for example, a committee structure, but there's nothing written in stone about that. They're fairly typical things like an executive committee, and how do you want that composed? An audit and finance committee, which I don't think anybody's going to have an argument about needing such a thing, given the money we're discussing.
That's an MOU too.
And it's in the MOU as well. The personnel committee. I mean, this organization is going to need a staffing structure. It's going to need a, personnel handbook. And all of that is going to be within the purview of the executive director, but typically in the not-for-profit world, the basic personnel policies are approved by the board. So, and then you have to think about who's going to evaluate the executive director and those kinds of things. So we built in sort of charters for these committees, but any addition to that language, changes in those kinds of languages is what we're looking for. Talk about we put an investment committee in and something we're just for the moment calling the grant oversight committee. We may have left something out that you think is, important or that would be helpful. So we need to get the commentary back. And however you want to do that, get it back to us, but also I'm fine with a reply to all on comments on the code to get some discussion going. It may drive us a little crazy. But if you want to do it on, we send this out to the whole board. And you'll have everybody's email address and if you want to, comment all, fine. If you want to comment back to Holly, who was the primary drafter of this thing, we can try, it reflects the revised code and it reflects the MOU. We're happy to entertain questions you have about it, but we want you to have some time to think about it, read it, mark it up. If what you could do technologically is mark it up manually and scan it to us, that's okay too. We're good with old school.
There's an urgency to this, right?
Yes. Because
There is, but I want to state that we want to get this right.
Right. But
So-
I guess what I'm asking, because is it a 2-week thing or is it a 2-month thing, right? Do we need this to submit for the,
we needed to submit for the application.
Okay.
We have time on the application from the IRS perspective. We've got 27 months from the date of incorporation, get the exemption date back to the date of incorporation. So which we filed in December.
so this,
But we also heard from the insurer that we can't get you insured.
understood. So it seems like this would be better for a full-blown board discussion at a full-blown meeting.
My suggestion would be that over the next 2 weeks, we put a 2-week deadline on to get feedback to Holly on the code so that she can bring those changes back to the next board meeting for the discussion and have it sent back up to us prior to so that we can look at all the changes. And that then we can have further discussion and vote at that time on the code of regulations. So that we're only 30 days out.
Yep.
And as I said, you can reply just to Holly or you can reply to all if you want to generate some discussion. And people who are interested in joining that discussion will comment. That'll give us an opportunity for a more fulsome discussion at the board meeting. And there'll be things that, people will have thought of that we haven't, or someone will put something in a comment and someone else will say, but did you think about this? So we need more brains around this point. So I think 2 weeks works. I'm going to keeping a list of all the things I have to do with you.
Yep. So we'll have feedback to Holly in 2 weeks. And then it will be Holly will make those changes and it'll be brought back for discussion and a vote at the next board meeting. Policy.
So the policy committee, we attempted to meet and had, I think, one participant. So a doodle poll is currently out in the ecosystem. We have on the share file, we've started a process of adding links to all of the doodle polls. So feel free to, check that on an ongoing basis. If you decide there's something that you're not officially signed up for, but hey, this sounds interesting, I'd like to provide feedback, check the doodle poll and, that's a way to make sure that you can participate. We have, at the last meeting, we submitted to you, and are these, we should probably get each of the policies.
No.
Okay, so we'll be uploading onto the shared file. Leah made this book for me, which is very helpful, of all of the draft policies. I think as we go through the process of forming standing committees, some of these policies will likely make sense that we, move into those formal committees. But it's the same as the code. I think we need participation. We want review. So if there's, I don't know that we need to keep a working group going necessarily, but I do think that we should, we'll upload. And if there's one of the policies that makes more sense for someone to review than another, take a look at it, provide input and feedback. And then,
So do you want the entire group to be looking at it and giving you feedback, or do you want to stick with the working group?
I think that
And then they
more,
can print it out?
it's a lot of documents,
Okay.
is,
Um,
It's
actually,
oh, is it?
was it part of the board packet?
Oh,
from
yeah.
Last time?
It was.
So if you look up the May meeting, on the share file, under the board packet there, it's all under there.
But we'll upload.
I logged into the share files and, yeah,
When was that?
this week.
So I worked on it all day yesterday, so it should be up now. Sorry about that.
Does
Well-
everybody have their share file? I couldn't find out what that was,
There's a what?
the share file.
I worked on it yesterday, starting around 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So I don't know when you were on it, but it should be all up there now. If it's not, send me an email.
And we can add each of the documents separately as well. So that, again, I think, the role of the board, the transparency policy, the whistleblower policy, some of these are much more standard documents than others. But it will be important for you to review and provide input.
And please email me any problems you're having with the share file. I'm actively working on it, but was not working on it until yesterday.
There is, Leah, I just signed it in, so the board meeting packets are there, as well as the roster.
Okay.
I'm not showing anything under the working groups.
So if you
Yeah, I need to,
all of the members
Yes.
into all of the separate folders.
yes, we still need to do that. I need to upload the code of regulations. Yeah.
Great, thank you for all that. Okay. Is there any other questions on policy before we move on?
Well, the one other thing I'll mention, because Chris raised this at the last meeting, is in the spirit of carrying through with his remarks just a moment ago. We've pulled some draft policies and like a DEI or inclusion policy. So that's one that wasn't in that initial tranche, but we'll add that as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then I just added as the next one, messaging, which we have, Region 15, Region 18, and Region 8, who have volunteered to, work on the messaging. Okay, okay.
I interject briefly on the messaging committee. I've been reflecting, thank you. I've been reflecting since our earlier discussion on this and given the comments from the whole staffing firm that's working on this at Benish and how much time it may take to get our executive director and the right person in place. Should we look at paying a PIO in this interim period because of all of the scrutiny that this group is under and we know we'll be moving forward? Having a paid expert, so to speak, working on the messaging all the time, along with that committee input from the directors, obviously. But do you want to entertain a discussion on this now, or is that something we could talk about moving forward? I just hate to not address it in the interest of, the urgency that we may need to put somebody in place in this interim period till staff can get hired.
Great, thank you. Are there any comments regarding that?
So if I may, I understand that we're under scrutiny and that we're getting emails, accusing us of this or that, but really, until this board gets its feet under it, any message that we put out there, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's not gonna, over time, when we start the work and we start doing things, that's when the messaging is critical. Right now, people are going to take shots and that's okay. We're all, most of us are public officials. We're used to taking shots. to go out and hire someone to answer a couple of emails. You know, we're not ready to put a message out yet, honestly. We don't have anything to say yet because we're still very much in the early stages of forming this group. So I would hesitate to put out another RFP and try to be inclusive and hire somebody to be a PIO to say, we're not there yet. That's just my obnoxious opinion.
Any other comments?
Does Banesh have?
Yeah.
Do you guys have a marketing or PR person that we could work off of in the interim?
We do, I can't commit them. They actually, they actually do a lot.
We're smart enough to short the name of the law firm.
Oh, tell me about it.
I do think
This
that
is,
a marketing website on I really do.
This is Senator McCulley. I would agree that I don't know that we need to hire a full-time person at this time, given the fact that the committee hasn't really gotten off its feet yet. But I would say that I would slightly disagree with the previous comment that we don't really need to have somebody until we start doing things. I think when we do start doing things, there's going to have to be an awful lot of strategy and discussions as to how we're going to roll that out and how we're going to make a PR push with what we're doing, not only to raise awareness of the good things we're doing, but also to raise awareness of the availability of this resource to people. And so that takes planning, and it's something that I would agree, I think, with the first comment that was made, that it's probably best that we consult a professional. And so I would say, even if it's on a rolling 3-month basis, month basis, whatever the case may be, to get somebody under contract on a consulting basis who could work with us to try and develop that strategy and come up with the best plan. That way, when we do start making decisions, we're getting the best bang for our buck.
I'd like to raise my hand and agree with that too. I agree with what the comments of the speaker who just was laying out a case for having somebody on board. And Greta, I would agree with your comment. It's not that we need to be proactively putting out a big strategy and making a lot of statements, but we need to be prepared. I mean, the world we live in with social media and, you know, the divisiveness and the hostility that we have sort of in our country today, we just need to be prepared. And I think just to have somebody in place who's a professional who can respond if we have something that comes up unexpectedly, I think it would serve us very well to be prepared on that front. And whether it's somebody, Marty, who you can connect us to, or whether we need to engage a part-time professional, I'm not sure what the solution is there, but I think it's a very wise idea to do in the short term.
So I think, as Holly mentioned earlier, the Trust Digital has a marketing arm to it for messaging. So I think to get started, we hear everybody's comments, and let's see what Trust Digital has to offer us. And then we can move from there as to determine whether or not we need to engage another professional company at that point or hire some. But I think we need to see what they have before we move to that next step.
I'll also remind everyone we don't have it.
We don't have a bank account to pay anybody or money at this point.
That's a good suggestion. I've forgotten or didn't hear when Holly had mentioned that was part of the package.
So I definitely think we need to be looking at Trust Digital and letting Holly investigate that a little further, and hopefully by the next meeting,
At the 2-week mark.
at the 2-week mark, she will have information for us.
If I could chime in again, this is Senator McCulley again. I think that's good. That's well and good. I think we should look at them, especially if we're already going to engage them for one service. But I think we also need to keep in mind the uniqueness of what we're doing here and the level of public scrutiny that we're going to be under, not be afraid to open our search up to other potential consultants or other individuals, given the uniqueness, the unique nature of what we're going to be doing here. If we don't feel like Trust Digital has the experience necessary to handle what we're doing. And I think giving Holly that leeway and kind of that latitude to really kind of go out and have those conversations, so we have a buffet of options, if you will, at the next board meeting would be what I'd be in favor of.
Great, thank you. Great. Checklist review. I'm just gonna keep, you know what, here.
It's not, we really have not made changes since the last meeting.
And that is in the packet.
We discussed a lot of the stuff on here just as part of the general agenda.
It's just that, you know, as we look ahead, we wanted to make it clear that there's sort of priority items that we've discussed today. And then there's sort of many more that will come as next steps. So just, you know, a reminder that
So the scope of what needs to be done over some period of time is what this is really for. So it wasn't something we really needed to spend a lot of time on. We gave it to you last time, and since then we filled in some of, at least there's some done boxes checked, so to speak. But there's a lot more that need to be filled in, so. We decided that, that was just an easy way for us to keep the board apprised of the progress we're trying to make. Excuse me, there's something in my voice.
So next would be, under that, you have to establish standing committees.
So the standing committees are specifically laid out in the Code of Regulations. So, you know, you might consider taking formal action to establish after, you know, or at the same time as we go through the Code of Regulations. So that's just a flag for everyone under the committee section of the proposed Code of Regulations. If there's additional alternative committees that you think should be established, either standing committees or other committees that we want to get rolling in the short term, the next meeting would be the time to do that.
Search committee.
Well, I think we kind of, that's rolled up in, you know, we discussed how the hiring committee is going to proceed and what's going to come to the board. And then once the board is selected a search firm, then you will need a committee to, you know, work with them to vet the applicants that they bring to us. So I think that's, again, something that we'll down the road.
The expert panel committee.
So, the expert panel, there are a number of appointments that must be made by, and this is specifically by the metropolitan and the non-metropolitan director classes. So we need to, at some point, bring together just the regional board directors to have a discussion about who they would like to select to serve on the expert panel. And maybe the next step here could be, what's our process for soliciting potential candidates for consideration, so that when we do have that initial first meeting, we have a stack of resumes to actually contemplate. It might, I would imagine the public would be interested in many of these roles. I know they'll come from, you know, members of your community. But we might consider, you know, how we'll post that opportunity on the website, sort of in a more public way.
I don't have handy, do you know, remember off the top of how many?
Yeah, there's 6 members.
To be appointed by these regional directors as specified in the FDU.
I'm a member of either the regional or metro classes, so I do. But I wanted to ask that my first question was about 6. Are there criteria that specify what an expert is?
No, it's not There's nothing, let's see,
I don't think there's anything
No, there's-
new, really.
no.
Just finish with this. I would encourage my colleagues to consider both practitioners, scholars, people with lived experience.
Balance.
And there's nothing
The
that
group, but-
prevents you or anybody else on the board from recommending people or submitting names or getting people to submit their own names to the group that has to make the decision. I don't know why they set it up the way they did for that. Those appointments or whatever to be controlled by the regions, but that's what we got.
The governor has 2 appointments.
Right, but I mean, in terms of why they set it up the way they did. Left the governor's appointees and the AG's appointee out of determining the rest of the membership. But that's the way it is, but nothing prevents you from submitting names and resumes, beating the bushes and getting people exactly with lived experience and big professionals in the field who are willing to be considered for this one. Doesn't have to be a lifetime sinecure for them.
And I think it's key too that we address on this expert panel committee too, inclusion and equity. That's what we're.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Inclusion and
Inclusion.
And members of the board can serve on the expert panel. There's no, that was expressly written into the MOU. So but they need not be a member of the board, even outside. If you want to-
How are the metro and non-metro areas distinguished from one another?
It's in the map that was included as an appendix to the MOU. Metro
Is it-
are the 1 and 2 county regions. There's only 1 2-county region. The remaining 7 are 1 county regions. And then there's 11 multi-county, non-metropolitan regions.
Thank you.
Can you send us something related to the process as to how someone would either apply or voice their interest in serving on this expert panel?
Yeah, we could, and we could, yeah, I can work with you. Holly and I will work on getting that process together and get that out.
Thank you.
Do the recommendations have to come from the regional members?
The recommendations don't, but they are voted on and approved by.
Thank you.
So, I think you should go back to your communities and ask for great recommendations.
I mean, ideally, we'd like that are the deciders, if you will, to just have a, plethora of choices. We want to make a difficult job for them, choose between a lot of really qualified folks from all of the different, have a big enough pool of people. They can make it inclusive. Have a broad range of expertise. And I use the word expertise properly. So the more stuff on your table to look at, the better.
So believe it or not, we have made it to the last section of the agenda today. So this is really more of an open discussion for us. I know that Holly and Marty were, asked about guest speakers for future meetings, public comments, from our public. So I'd like to open the floor for discussion on, guest speakers, public comments. How does the board feel about that? How do we want to address that? I think it's really important that we put this in place now and moving forward. If it's going to be something the board wants, we will get it on the agenda every week and set aside a specific amount of time for that to happen. If it's not, we need to get that piece settled today.
I love the idea, and I'm wondering, since if we invite speakers, maybe we can have it a set forum where we are video calling in. That way, the time we're actually together, we can focus on some of our organizational priorities, but I love listening to people who have experience and knowledge in this area.
Yes.
I think we should allow for public comment, but I think we should have a time limit. When we meet together in person, absolutely, yes.
Definitely a time limit. We will be here all day with some.
Yes, and I think I'm in agreement when we meet in person to allow public comment with the time limit. But I think prior to the meeting, maybe it might be a good idea to have folks submit what they want to talk on. It's just a consideration.
And the guest speakers purposely to assist us in doing what we're doing, getting started. Because I don't think we need to hear from somebody that's not going to be relevant to what's going on now.
And that was not brought to me, that was brought to Holly and Marty, so I'll let you comment on that.
I think some members of the board had asked whether they could have someone from, their region come and present on, items of interest to the board. So whether it's sort of the impact of the epidemic on their communities, or, something that came to mind earlier is there are many individuals that specialize in how to make boards more inclusive. We could think about board training opportunities as well as experts within the OUD space. So I think it's a
very broad.
Yeah.
But I think it should be relevant to our current
Like the
position.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be careful because, we're gonna have a lot of money and a lot of them might be making a play, whether it's transparent or not, to get, some of the investments or grants or whatever. So I think we need to look at it pretty closely before we make a decision who speaks in investments. Because we're too busy to,
Right.
let that be done under the grant committee or whatever that is.
So maybe having that process in place that if a region or someone has a suggestion on a speaker, submitting that, and then the board saying, okay, well, this month we have all this going on. It's not going to be relevant until the next meeting. So maybe putting something in writing to the group, and then we can decide as to when that person would be able to come and speak. Is that something? Because Jeff, you were,
Yeah, so I sit on a few different boards and I'm usually the guy that says the awkward thing that causes trouble. So I'm gonna do that here. Go for it.
all right, go.
First of all, I appreciate, what we did today, right? We got through a lot. To me, it's incredibly challenging to have half of our board virtual and half of our board in person. It's really difficult to communicate back and forth that way. There's, for folks who are virtual, it's hard to understand who's talking. When we're talking and it's hard to understand who's talking on your end and it's easy for me to say this because I live in Pickerington, which is 30 minutes from where we're sitting today. But to me, the import of the work that we're doing is, I think it almost requires the full board to sit in a room together to get through these things and have really good, vigorous debates and good, vigorous discussions about where we're going with things, because we're talking about so much money and we're talking about such a incredible impact we can have on the citizens that asking folks to travel from all the corners of the state to come to Columbus, and we can over time move the meeting around in the different corners of the state. I'm happy to drive 2 hours to go somewhere for a meeting like this. So I guess I would ask that, I mentioned earlier for interim meetings, stuff that we can just vote and go. Having Zoom meetings is great. If we're all on a Zoom, that works. But for board meetings, having half and half is really a challenge. So I'm hoping that we can, through a doodle poll or some other method, find a date where most of us can be in person together.
If I can pipe up here.
I just think if we were tighter, maybe our next meeting, we can bring tables in tighter, and that would give us better access to listening. I'm going to bring my laptop in addition to being here. That way I'll have literally their screen a few inches away from me, but I appreciate everything you said on that.
Arvin, did you say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as one of the people who has to travel over 2 hours to come to Columbus, I prefer Zoom meetings. And so I would be the voice suggesting that we do that. I certainly agree that it's hard to do hybrid, but it's also hard to do 2 hour each way meetings. And if I can also be a little bit, probably it's not unanimous here, but I like the idea of having speakers, having guest speakers that are picked, but having our council meetings all have public comment, and it is often the comments are not limited to anything that's germane to what's being discussed that day. And we do have a time limit, but if you have 100 people come in, time limit it's irrelevant. It's still going to keep you all day. So I would suggest that if regional councils want to have public comment, that's up to them. But I suggest that this foundation board not have public comment.
Hi, it's Jane. One request that I would have, if we could work towards it, and I realize we're so in formation right now that it may be a challenge, but if we can try to get some meetings on the calendar in advance, more than just, 2 weeks out, if we can try to look at the several months ahead and book, that would be helpful to me in terms of trying to make it to Columbus when I can, as opposed to virtual. So I'm on the fence about whether certainly virtual is much more convenient in many ways, but it is a challenge. And I'm looking forward to getting to Columbus and meeting with everybody in person. Having a calendar laid out several months ahead would allow me to do that.
Thank you. I would agree.
You can try and do that with the work groups. too,
Right,
which
and
is very
that's the other thing, as our work groups are evolving, I had a conversation with Marty yesterday about having our work groups actually meeting the day of our board meeting. So whether that be before or after, this way we aren't making another trip, we aren't having to make another meeting. Obviously there might be some meetings that need to take place in between that, but if they met before the board meeting, then they would be able to report out, finalize anything they need, report out to us for any type of board action that might take place. Just a suggestion, throwing that out there for the work groups, to make it a little more convenient. I know I drive just over 3 hours to be here. So, so you come from the other end. And Arvind is, he's just about an hour from me. So, I recognize that there are people traveling, and it does, I would agree that in person with the important work that we're going to be doing is critical, but I also recognize that we are still going to probably have to offer a virtual for, hopefully a very minimal group that may not be able to attend in person, but I would encourage in-person participation for the meetings. If
I could, I agree with trying to move it around if it's at all possible. But I also support what Jane was saying about the time and knowing when we can. For those of us that travel to Columbus for other meetings, and I'm coming from the northern part of the state, so traveling, if we know ahead of time, and then maybe sometimes we can dovetail that not only with this foundation, but with other activities that we have if we're coming to Columbus. But it also would sure be nice to see some other communities while we're putting this together.
In some cases, like for you,
Yes.
For you or I, that'd be a 5-hour drive.
Oh, you know,
Catherine's giving you a private plane.
probably a day's work. So, you know, and again, yes, moving things around isn't, you know, I don't think that's off the table. I just think we have to really kind of look at where everybody is coming from and how we can get everybody in person. Next week, I'm driving 4.5 hours for a meeting. So, the work that we're doing is critical. The work on the opiate epidemic is critical. And you're all here for a reason. You're all here because you believe in that work, that this foundation is going to be new. So again, I just put out there that in person would be highly suggested, but we will also, I know we need to offer that virtual. So I know that we had some that were not in agreement of public comment. We had some that were in agreement, and we had some that were in agreement for guest speakers at meetings. So could we wrap this up and
I think, I'm sorry I forgot your name, but you made I would propose we're not ready to decide that. We have to build this thing first before you can comment to us. So could that be a discussion we could have a little bit later?
could we leave it on the agenda so that we don't lose it?
Yeah.
And that we continue to have future discussions in regards to that?
And I agree. You know, I think we're just now figuring out committees and who's going to be on the committees and board, you know, the code of regulation. We're still in just the beginning stages of this. And maybe in a couple of months.
A kind of different topic, but along those lines, do we have some dates that we need to be shooting for to have some of these items completed?
So
I mean, 2 weeks, we're gonna be doing a lot, but I guess, and we don't have to decide that now. But I think as we move forward, it would be nice to have dates established by which we want to have.
when we're
specific
doing
tasks.
actions.
Yeah.
So under the 2 weeks, I have the RFP to be completed for the search firm and the job description. And the banks would also will be presented. Is there an item that I'm missing for the 2 week?
Yes.
And then I'm going to do the report out in 2 weeks on a potential marketing strategy.
Okay.
And then I did have a question,
We really do need to, if we're going to get the RFP for the executive director in 2 weeks, we really need to decide, is fundraising a part of that job and a part of what we decide for the foundation? Or is it just to collect money and hand out grants? Because they're very different functions for that we need to guide the search committee in recruiting an executive director for.
We've been here, because I think my suggestion is that this whole question of whether this foundation, A, should raise money, and B, can it raise money, it's not going to be an attractive target, if you will, for donors when it's got $450 million pouring into it. If down the road, we figure out that it can and wants to do targeted fundraising, I think then that's when you hire a professional who does that, Michael. Rather than try and split the baby right now, we need somebody with very strong organizational skills and hopefully some grant making experience. And I think if we add yet another to it,
There is another way down the line to be able to do that. Kind of a model that's out of a foundation where you can ask for particular initiatives. This organization could put out and ask if other people want to contribute to it, as opposed to have it being a fundraising feature. Because there may be different enterprises, businesses, or individuals that want to support the activities. and we'll do it maybe on a project by project basis. So that might be something as opposed to fundraising in the traditional sense that we might consider later down the line.
Thank you.
I have great appreciation for talented developers.
I think if that is so, it makes it easier as well as it changes the salary structure considerably. So I think that's a very good, I mean, if we're all in favor of no fundraising for the experience or requirement of this executive director, that changes things and makes it easier.
I actually liked the idea. I hadn't thought about having a CEO who was also a fundraiser until this came up today. But I do think it's something worthy of discussion. And we were just chatting here that fundraising is actually a huge portion of any 501c3's CEO's responsibilities. So it would be more traditional to have CEO who is also a fundraiser.
I think if you don't consider it at all, then you may not have the caliber of candidates applying because they wouldn't have had that experience. And as you said, most executives should and do have that experience, in my opinion.
Or maybe they had that experience and didn't like it.
That's true.
You know, I don't see when you say it's not traditional fundraising. I would see this person, once they get established, to work with other foundations. And that fundraising might be matching other foundations, grants, and I see it more as a collaboration with other public foundations or private foundations. Fundraising, it's not going to happen with Dollar General Bank. Matching grants with other foundations and voting on initiatives, absolutely. So I put it in as development, but
it's a different skill.
Yeah.
So the skill set that you're talking, there's two different skill sets that are being talked about. A fundraiser is very different than what you're suggesting.
And that's
exactly. And I think that's more of what we're looking for.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Very good point. Thank you for bringing it.
We don't have bake sales.
Yeah, no bake sales.
No bake sales. You've never seen me bake.
You want to sell candy?
Candy, maybe.
I'm gonna have a car wash.
Okay, so we need to set our meetings. So we need a meeting date for 2 weeks out because we have some action items that need to be taken. Yes.
I'm really nervous about 29 people looking at their phones right now to come up with the meeting.
Well, that's
Get us a Google out today or something.
Yeah, I can send a doodle link later.
for the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we will also need one for, I'd like to really establish a specific day of the month that we're going to meet. So if we could establish, Leah, some type of doodle poll, once we get one established that maybe it's, and this is not a recommendation, I'm just throwing this out, like the fourth Wednesday of the month at, so that we have a specific time that those traveling can put on the calendars, those locally can, make sure that their meetings are set. And that, we need to look at morning or afternoon and with work groups being able to meet either prior or after. My suggestion is the board meeting takes place in the afternoon so that the work groups have time to meet in the morning and then present in the afternoon. Also, for those of us, well, I guess it doesn't really pertain to me because I'm on the committee, but if it was a 1 o'clock meeting, I wouldn't be coming down the night before. I would be able to drive to the 1 o'clock and then turn around. So those coming long distance, it may be easier for them for traffic.
So are you looking at 2 weeks from today in the afternoon?
No, she's gonna send out 2 weeks for a Zoom. Yeah. And then we would be putting out for 4 weeks for our monthly meeting, and that would then be established as a specific time and date. But I want you all to be thinking about, work groups are gonna have to meet, and if we're meeting in person, having those working groups be able to meet around, the same day to lessen travel. I think that would be considerate of, our colleagues.
So look for your doodle polls.
So we're gonna look for doodle polls at this time. Again, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here today. I greatly appreciate it. There is lunch available. You're welcome to bring it in and have lunch.
Still 13 minutes left, so could public comment occur here any final quick 2 minutes?
Motion to adjourn.
Really adjourn. If not, so proper communication with the board would be media and litigation. Thank you.
Can I just also make a plug to say thank you to the County Commissioners Association for hosting us?
Yes.
Greatly appreciate it.
And you did receive at the beginning of the meeting, a list to check off. If you haven't turned that in, if you can turn that in, it would be greatly appreciated. We're working on
Can
it.
I have my lease back to check something else?
Yeah. No, I won't.
I haven't seen any more.
Well, we won't pick the last Wednesday. Thank you, everyone who joined virtually. We greatly appreciate your participation and hope to see you in person soon.
Thanks, see ya.